Hi, everybody. We're just going to wait one more minute to see who else joins us today. I know we had a few more participants than this registered, so we'll just wait another minute or so and then we can go ahead and get started. Got to figure out how to have some music or something while we're waiting for everyone to join.
I need to know. Does anybody have any good jokes? I know. Our office is in the Landmark Center in downtown St. Paul, and it was last Friday. I was just here working in the office, and all of a sudden, it was just there was African drumming everywhere, and it was so loud, and it was so amazing. But I was like, oh yeah, you gotta remember, this is like a public place where there's a lot of music and events going on. So I apologize. I could have had some African drumming if we had done this on Friday, but
Would have been kind of cool.
yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, I am recording this, Amy. So why don't we go ahead and get started? And then as more people jump on, they can. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really glad you all can make it today. I'm Rachel Holmes. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Community Engagement with the Food Group. I think I've known and met and seen a lot of you before in different parts of these spaces. So it's great to see you all again and welcome. We are here today to talk about something really important and really timely right now, and that's voter registration and how food shelves can kind of play a role in the voter registration process because the work that we do, is largely about feeding people and make sure they have food on the table for their families, but it's also about empowering people to have a voice and use that voice when possible. So it's great to have you all here today. Amy is joining us. Amy is the Associate Director at the League of Women Voters Minnesota and is going to give a little presentation today about, voter registration activities, what's allowable for nonprofits, and be able to answer any other questions we have. So I'm going to turn it right on over to Amy.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Rachel. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to see you, and it's nice to be here with you. Thanks for joining on your lunch hour as we talk about voter registration 101. As Rachel said, I am the Associate Director for the League of Women Voters Minnesota. In Minnesota, we have 33 other local chapters of the League of Women Voters also who are doing this kind of work all around the state. But I work at the state office, and I am just delighted to be here with you today. So today we're going to go over, we'll talk about nonpartisanship, what it means, what it doesn't mean, some of the challenges and opportunities that we face as we think about civic engagement and voting and registering to vote. And then we'll go over the basics of who can vote. We'll talk about key election deadlines that you'll want to keep in mind and kind of the nuts and bolts of how to register both online with paper or in person. And then there are a number of new election laws that have gone into effect in the recent months and over the last year. And I won't go through all those, but I did pull out a couple select laws to go over with you too, because it might come up with the work that you're doing. And so I want to make sure that you're aware of those as well. And then we'll talk about some different resources, and I'll leave plenty of time for Q&A. My presentation today will only be about 20 minutes long, so we'll have lots of time to talk and brainstorm afterwards. So as Rachel mentioned, I'm with the League of Women Voters, and as an organization, we've been around for over 100 years, 104 years to be exact, doing this exact kind of work, just educating people about how to participate in the civic process, sharing good information, and registering people to vote. And so thank you again for joining me. We're going to start first by talking about nonpartisanship, because this is a really common thing that I encounter a lot in the work that I do, whether it's out in the community giving this, talks like this or registering voters. A common misconception is that registering voters and helping people get out the vote is partisan. And oftentimes, nonprofits especially are really worried about that because we don't want to violate, I'm in a nonprofit too, we don't want to violate any of our IRS laws, right? And so I just want to clear that up for you that registering people to vote and encouraging them to vote is a nonpartisan activity. It is absolutely something that you can and should be doing. It's something that anybody can do. The key, though, is to remain nonpartisan. And so when you're talking to clients, or maybe you're holding a registration drive, or whatever kind of activity you're doing, you want to just make sure that you're really keeping that separate from talking about any political parties or specific politicians. And I know that's really hard, especially, in an election year. But as long as you do that, you will be just fine. And I want to remind you that voting as a civic act is not a partisan activity. Issues aren't partisan, facts aren't partisan. But we want to just be very careful that we're not endorsing any candidate or political party, because that would cross the line into partisan activities. So as long as we're not doing that, we are okay. I can't see a lot of you as I'm presenting, but I just wanted to stop on that too and just check to see if there were any questions that people maybe had about nonpartisanship, or anything that you've encountered in your work that you wanted to ask about. Okay. I'm not seeing any hands, but for sure we can talk about it later too, or if you think of something later, we can run over that. Um, So as you're well aware, we have many challenges to civic participation that we're all up against this day and age, right? We have very low voter turnout, especially among younger voters. There's a lack of reliable candidate information. There's a lack of nonpartisan information, right? And it's not easily accessible. It's not always easy to go out and research candidates on your own. And then that, coupled with the spread of mis and disinformation too, makes this a really challenging time to do this work. But of course, with where there are challenges, there's also plenty of opportunities. Being that it's such a busy election year, everybody's aware of that. There are a lot of opportunities where nonprofits like yours can touch base with people across the state, and you can help share factual information with your communities about voting and elections. And part of doing that is to make sure the folks that you're encountering are well equipped and that they have all the information they need to participate with confidence, right? So many challenges, but many opportunities. So we're just going to start with the very basic of the basics. Who runs elections in Minnesota? Overall election, the whole process is overseen by the Office of the Secretary of State. Right now, that's Steve Simon. And a lot of what I'm going to refer to today are resources that live on the Secretary of State's website, because there is so much good information on there that you can use, a lot of fact sheets that you can download and print off, and the work that you might be considering doing. So I'll be sure to show you some of those too as we move along. So who can vote in Minnesota? So in Minnesota, you do need to be a US citizen. You need to be 18 years old on election day. You must be a resident of Minnesota for 20 days, not currently incarcerated for a felony conviction, not have been found by a court to be legally incompetent, and not under a court order that revokes your right to vote. So as long as you meet those criteria, you are eligible to vote. Now, some people may need to update their registration or re-register. And so if you have moved, or you've changed your name, or you haven't voted in more than 4 years, those are all situations that would necessitate you needing to re-register or update your registration. And then, of course, if you had your right to vote has been taken away and it was recently restored, with the Restore the Vote Act that passed last year, you also need to re-register or register for the first time too. So those are a couple situations in which you'd want to update that information. It's been a busy election year so far. These were some of our key dates and deadlines throughout the year, and we're currently in the highlighted area, right? So early voting has started. People are doing that right now. There are a lot of voter registration drives happening all across the state too. So if you personally were thinking about hosting a registration drive or sharing information at the sites that you work, now is the perfect time to do that. Um, but you're going to want to be aware that on October 15th is the last day to pre-register. So that means on that date, you're going to want to stop encouraging people to pre-register and then instead direct them to register to vote in person at their polling location on election day. They can do that, or they can also register when they vote early at their county elections office too. So now's the time. It's super busy. It's a great time to do voter registration and education events. Um, Another thing that you'll want to be aware of besides the October 15th deadline is that if people are voting by mail, you're going to want to encourage those folks to submit their absentee ballots at least a week before the November 5th deadline, right? So that last week of October is really key to turning in those absentee ballots if they're returning them by mail. So we want to make sure that we give them enough time to get to the Secretary of State's office. To register, people are going to need to know the following things. They're going to need to know their birth date, their address, their email address, their driver's license, state ID number, or the last 4 digits of their social security number. Now, the email address is required if the person is registering online. It's not required if they're submitting a paper application, but we do highly suggest that everybody include an email address because if a person were to turn in an incomplete registration form, it's just a really easy way for the Secretary of State's office to get a hold of them. So always encourage folks to fill that out. And then there are a couple of different ways that people can register. We're going to talk a little bit first about registering online. So if you go to mnvotes.gov, this is what you'll see. This is the Secretary of State's website. You're going to want to choose the elections and voting tab here, and then select the drop down that says register to vote. And when you do that, you're going to come to a page that looks like this. And this is where you can register, whether it's your first time or you're re-registering, you can do that here. You can update your registration. You can also check your registration online too. This is a question, this is the number one question I think I get when I'm doing voter education events is people say, I don't know if I'm registered. How do I know? So we always come here and we can check really easily by clicking this link. If you want to register by paper or if somebody wants to do that, you can scroll down on this page too, and you can print out a voter registration application. And they can print that out and mail that in on the same page. So that's you registering online. We can register on paper, and people can also register in person. And I mentioned this just a minute ago, but right now we are in early voting season. So if people want to register at their county elections office right now with their absentee ballot, they can do that. And they can also, in Minnesota, you can register to vote on election day, which is amazing. Now, in order to do that, people do have to go to their polling place to register in person on election day, but that is possible. I have links in my slide here, which I'll share with you all after this, but links to find your early voting location. So if somebody's voting with their absentee ballot right now, they need to know where to go. They can go to the Secretary of State's website to find those locations. And I also have a link here to an election day registration fact sheet. I thought that could be something that might be useful in the work that you're doing as well. So there's a link in the slides for that. If you're thinking about doing, if you're planning to host a registration drive, That's fantastic. That's one way to help get out the vote, right? Is to just be there at a table and help people register to vote. But there are a couple things that you're going to want to keep in mind if you're doing that. You're going to want to think about, are you going to be registering people on paper, or are you going to be doing it online and just providing resources to do that online? Either one's fine. You're going to want to consider like what kind of an environment you're working in and how reliable is the internet and those kinds of things. But if you are handing out and collecting paper registrations, you do need to turn those in. If you're turning them in for people too, you need to turn those in within 10 days of filling them out. So that's something to know, whether you're collecting registrations and turning them in for people, or if they're submitting them on their own, they need to be submitted within 10 days of the person signing that application. Um, Regardless of the method of registration, you're going to want to help people check for accuracy. So you're going to want to review the online application, make sure that all of the areas are filled out correctly, and make sure that it's signed and dated at the bottom. And then you'll want to let people know too that that they'll get a postcard in the mail with their polling information. Um, and if you are thinking about doing a voter registration event, whether it's a drive or you're just sharing information, you can get a lot of really great outreach materials at the Secretary of State's office for free. So that last little bit right there, I have the email address, voteroutreach.oss@state.mn.us. If you email them, you can ask for things like voter registration forms in English or in other languages too. A lot of the downloadable posters that the Secretary of State has, they'll also ship those to you along with those I voted or I will vote stickers. So you can get all kinds of fun things for your outreach efforts for free by emailing the Secretary of State's office. So it's kind of a cool thing that we have access to. I know at the league, we take advantage of that all the time. And so you should too, and don't be afraid to reach out to them if there's something that you want. Um, so if you are doing something in person, there are established best practices that you're going to want to follow. For example, you're going to want to remain neutral. Don't endorse political parties or candidates or specific policies when you're doing voter registration work. Keep the focus on civic duty, not on political action. So highlight the right and responsibility that we all have to participate. Keep things nonpartisan. So you're going to want to make sure that there are no, that, you're personally not wearing any campaign, related articles of clothing, that there's no political signage or discussion of partisan topics when you're registering voters. And then, of course, make sure to encourage everyone to register to vote. Remind them that their vote matters. I mean, especially in these local elections where the people who are running for election make decisions that impact our daily lives, right, on a day-to-day basis. So this year in Minnesota, everyone will have the president on their ballot, of course. They'll have US Senator, US House, and the entire legislature is up for re-election this year too. So everyone is going to have those offices on their ballot, and it's important that folks are empowered and excited to vote. You're probably like me, if you do a voter registration drive, you're gonna run across the same questions over and over again. A lot of times when I'm out doing these, I find that most people are registered, but they want more information about their polling place. So they'll ask, where do I vote? And in that case, I'll pull up the polling place finder on the Secretary of State's website. They're curious if they're already registered or not. So you can check that for them at mnvotes.gov. And they're also going to want to know who's on their ballot. So there are a couple ways to do that. Again, you can go through the Secretary of State's website and view your sample ballot. I have the link in here. Or you can use Vote 411. which is it's a voting one-stop shop basically that the League of Women Voters Minnesota and our local leagues put together that's free to use for everybody. You can go here, you can see your sample ballot, you can read about candidates who are running for office. We invite everybody to participate in our voter guide. And many candidates they're still filling it out now, but you can read the answers to their questions and you can learn about the office that they're running for too. And towards the end of our presentation, I will hop on Vote for One just briefly to show you what that looks like because it is a really great tool. So those are some of the common questions that I get. Now, you might also get questions about some of the newer laws that have passed that impact voting in Minnesota. I think there were 33 of them last year. I won't go through all those, but I'm going to go through a couple of the top ones just in case they come up. So recently in Minnesota, we expanded our laws and made it even easier to cast a ballot. The new language access provisions are now added to the Secretary of State's website, and they're available at polling places across the state. So in 2023, a new law passed that required all polling places in Minnesota to have voter instructions and sample ballots in Spanish, Somali, and Hmong, in addition to English. In precincts that have at least 3% of voters speaking a different language, voter instructions and sample ballots are available in those languages as well. And then for those precincts where 20% of the voters speak a language other than English, voters can request translation services. So that's really important information to share if it's useful to folks that you're working with. I put a link in my slides too to the language access provisions. If you want to dig more into that, you can do that. And also you can find the request for translation services through the link on my slide as well. As many of you probably know too, Restore the Vote passed, which re-enfranchises over 55,000 Minnesotans. So now in Minnesota, if somebody was impacted by this law in the past, they are now eligible to vote as of June 1, 2023. So they can vote as long as they are no longer incarcerated. So the League of Women Voters Minnesota is working across the state at re-entry fairs, educating people about this new law, helping them get directed to where they can register or re-register. So that is really exciting. It's wonderful news, and it's something that the league has been working on for at least the last 20 years. So we were super excited when this passed last year. I have a link to another little handout from the Secretary of State's office called Voting with a Criminal Record Fact Sheet that you can download and print and share with people if you think that would be helpful. Also in Minnesota now, 16 and 17-year-olds can pre-register. So that's also really exciting because we know that when people are registered, they are much, much more likely to vote. And the Secretary of State and the League of Women Voters has lots of resources on how to do this if you are working with this age group. But that's something to know too, that people that are 16 and 17 can absolutely pre-register. It's the same form. It's the same registration form that we all use. So that's good information to share as well. We also have automatic voter registration that was approved by the Minnesota legislature and signed into law last year. So this is where people are registered to vote when they go to renew their driver's license, their permit, or their state ID card. There's actually, it's kind of a misnomer. It says automatic, but there's actually like a lot of different steps and checks that are in place for this process in Minnesota right now. So if people are interested in sharing information about that, I put a link to more information from the Secretary of State's office too. But that's important to know that that's just another way that people are able to register to vote. And also to know that people can opt out of this if they want to. So those I think are some of the laws and some of the recent changes that might come up if you're considering sharing information or holding a registration drive. So good to be aware of those things. It's also good to know where you can go for resources. Of course, the League of Women Voters has lots of resources, Vote 411. I'm going to stop screen sharing here for just a second because I do want to show that to you. But we also host candidate forums all across the state. This is where we invite candidates for office to come in and answer questions and from the public. And we have many scheduled over this upcoming month. We also have lots of recordings, so you can check our candidate forum page on our website too to see if there's a forum in your area that you want to share with people or watch for yourself. We also have a section of our website called Elections 411 that explains how elections work. And then we have a really handy elections information bookmark that we've been giving out this year, which has the basic requirements to register to vote. It's got QR codes to register, QR codes to vote 411. It also has the Secretary of State's election hotline information on it. So that's kind of a really easy resource that you can share with people. And then the Secretary of State also has a really great voter outreach toolkit. So if you want to take even a deeper dive or just peruse that, it's only about 15 pages long. You can look and see what might be helpful in the work that you're doing. So I'm going to just jump over to Vote 411 really quick because I wanted to show it to you briefly. Because I think it's just really a handy way to get people the information that they need. So you go to Vote 411 basically, and you just plug in your address like I just did. And it'll take you to a page that looks like this. It'll tell you about the upcoming elections that you have and if there are elections coming up in the future. Well, there's nothing imminent after the general election, so there's nothing there. But then it will show you which races are on your ballot. So we have a lot of judicial races, but what you can do from here is you can just select what you're interested in learning about. So I selected US Senator. And then you can learn a little bit about what a senator does right here and about this race. And then you can see the candidates who are running. And you can click on them to see to find more information about their campaign and to see how they answered the questionnaire that we sent them. So I picked Amy Klobuchar, Joyce, and Royce. And this first section will tell you how to contact these folks, what their campaign websites are, and that kind of thing. And then below that will be the questions that we sent them. So just as an example, if elected, what will your top 3 priorities be and why? You can read what Amy says, what Joyce says, and Royce hasn't filled his out yet. But you can go through and you can compare the candidate answers. So this is a great way to learn about candidates. We know that it's a barrier for a lot of people to voting is because they feel like they don't know enough about the candidates to cast their ballot. They don't have enough information that they need. And so Vote 411 really helps kind of solve that problem. So that is what it looks like just in a nutshell. And then let's see. So being nonprofit employees who are working with members of the public, there is so much that you can do yourselves. It doesn't have to be a voter registration drive, but certainly you could do that. And you could hand out resources like the bookmarks or like some of the Secretary of State's fact sheets about voting. You could just share information. with the people that you come in contact with. You can work to educate your community about how elections work by sharing elections Vote 411 and Vote 411. But I think the most effective thing that you can do, honestly, is to just encourage people to vote, invite them to vote, and share with you what their voting plan is. This is another little bit of research that, especially with younger voters, can be really helpful. Like if you ask them what their plan to vote is, it kind of forces them to think through what they're going to do. And they, again, are just more likely to vote. So a lot of times people, especially new voters, just they need to be invited and encouraged to vote. And being that you all are trusted resources in your community, I think that you would be the perfect people to do this and to invite people to participate. And that's kind of the nuts and bolts of voter registration 101 that I wanted to share with you all today. I'd like to open it up for questions, comments. Wondering if any of you have plans to do a voter registration drive or share information, and what you would need from me to do that, because I'm happy to provide resources too. So what are you all thinking? And that's okay. This can just be food for thought too. I'll share this presentation with Rachel, and maybe Rachel, you can send it out to people. Because I know we went over a lot of information. There's a lot of links in there and things like that, that you might want to refer to as you think back, on what we covered today. But thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Amy. Sean Morrison here. Just wanted to say, first of all, thank you. Or I'll actually get my video on so you can see a face. If I can. But I wanted to thank you. I'm not in Greece. That's just a nice, really cute background. But thank you for doing this. I think the key thing that I'm hearing is, making sure people have access and are aware. And I appreciate that, because I think sometimes people get caught up in whatever they're doing, and they just, as much as we see it on TV and stuff, we sometimes just forget the basics. And I think that's a really important thing that we keep mentioning, like you said, without taking a stance, but we say we want to encourage voting, because I think we need the voices and the votes of our community, and those who we serve, they certainly have intellectual equity that we sometimes don't tap into very well. So I really appreciate what you're doing. So thank you for taking the time to share this with us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sean. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and the 411 is a great resource. I know I will probably dive into that very much so for my area too in my elections. But I also wanted to note that Peter Wojtak is on the call. He's our government relations manager at the food group. So if you do have any questions about the candidates, or if they've supported our work that affects our organizations, and if you ever want to learn a little bit more about them or get involved and have them over at your food shelf to see what's going on too, please reach out and we can help with that as well. So slightly related but unrelated topic too.
Thanks, Rachel. Somebody did ask for the link to the bookmark, so I put that in there twice in the chat. It's just a link on our website to a PDF that you can print on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. It's double-sided. It has information about how to access Vote 411, key dates, how to register, Secretary of State's election hotline information, and QR codes for all of that. So yeah, you can download that and use it. I have limited capacity to mail some out, so if you're interested in that, just shoot me an email. I'll put that in the chat too. But I'd be happy to mail you some bookmarks too.
One more time, I was just going to mention just how important voting is. The last, I think it was election in Brooklyn Park, the mayor won by one vote, and they did a recount. It was a 2-vote victory. So, I mean, that's now that's not electoral votes, but like at the president level, but that shows how strong and important it is for every person to get out there and to be informed, but also to be able to be active and do it. So I think it's so important we bring attention to this.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a number of instances in recent history too, where entire elections were decided on one or two votes, and so you're absolutely right. It's very important. And I think just being there in the way that you all are, answering questions and sharing information is going to go a long way to making sure that people do register and show up and vote. Like I said, a lot of time I work with a lot of first time voters, whether they're high school students or people who are, leaving prison behind or whatever the case may be. And such a big part of it is just inviting them to participate and answering questions and reassuring them that, there are no stupid questions, right? Like we're all here to learn, and so that it's a really important work. And I'm glad that in addition to what you're all are already doing, that you're interested in taking this on too. So thank you.
Any other questions for Amy or anyone else planning to do any voter registration work they want to share with the group before we call it a day for this meeting? Okay. Well, yes, I look for an email from the food group and the Hunger Solutions team, and we will be sure to send some of the resources that we were shared with today from Amy and some other ways to get involved in this work. And thank you everybody so much for your time. And big thanks to Amy for being here today and sharing your expertise. It was incredibly helpful. So thank you
Yeah,
again.
thanks everybody. Yeah, reach out anytime. We're happy to help at the league. So
All
have a
right.
good day.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
We'll talk to y'all soon. Take care.